Okay, hi everyone. I'm Jayne Groll. I'm CEO of the DevOps Institute and really proud that DevOps Institute became a member of the Continuous Delivery Foundation this year. So we're really excited about the work that's happening and will continue to happen through initiatives like this. I'm probably going to be a little bit of a different speaker because we're going to talk about humans, right? So first of all, I have to ask a very important question. How many of you in the room are human? Anybody not? I want to make sure. I see a couple of hands in the back that aren't quite sure. You know, in CI/CD we talk a lot about automation, and we talk a lot about the need for automation. And I'm not certainly going to, say that that's not important, but it's not the only piece of it. And if you've really been paying attention to the market, I think one of the things that's really emerged lately is the fact that the human element of DevOps, of Kubernetes, of digital transformation, pick whichever term you like, is really starting to rise, not only as being important, we all knew that, right? We all knew that. It's really rising as the most important critical success factor, right? So you are the single most important part of a CI/CD pipeline. And please don't ever let anybody else tell you differently. Today what we're going to do is we're going to look at some data, right? We're going to look at some interesting facts about skills, right? Everybody hearing a lot about upskilling, right? Everybody, you're being told to upskill. We're going to take a look at some data that looks at which skills are considered must-have, nice-to-have, and not as important. And we're going to talk about kind of the human perspective of CI/CD, of course, but also let's go bigger than that, of the human perspective and the human need inside of initiatives that your organizations are driving forward. Right? To compete in the digital age, we know you have to be digital, but don't ever forget that at least today, the human element is really, really important. So title of the presentation is What About Us? All right, and let's talk about upskilling. So a little bit about me. I've been in IT a fairly long time. I was an IT director for a long time across multiple verticals. I spent some time in the ITIL ITSM space. Anybody doing ITIL in your organization? A few of you, right? Change management. We'll talk a little bit more about that. I'm a Scrum Master. We founded DevOps Institute. I'll tell you a little bit about that in a second. About 4 years ago, starting to see the rise of DevOps from about 2012. So I have a little bit of a heritage in this space. More importantly, I've walked your shoes. Right, so I spent most of my IT career in operations. How many of you are operations? Would you consider self-identify as ops? How about how many of you would self-identify as development? Okay, pretty healthy. What about security? A little bit, right? A little bit. So again, I come from the ops side of the house. I spent a long time managing NOCs and operations team, infrastructure teams, again, across pretty wide variety of vertical markets before I started to really get involved in frameworks, and I said I had a really good opportunity to see the early days of DevOps. If you're not familiar with the DevOps Institute, we're an open member community, so please go up to www.devopsinstitute.com, become a member, it's free. We have a Guru Cafe, there's continuous learning minutes, there's a lot of assets there. We also accredit 7, soon to be 8 certifications, very skill-specific certifications around DevOps. I'm not going to tell you too much more about that. I'll tell you about some upcoming events as we get closer to the end of the presentation. But again, it's free in an open environment. You know, we really feel that it's important to have an open community where people all around the world have an opportunity to interact with each other. So let's start our story kind of looking at IT as a system of systems. So, you know, I asked you before which kind of part of the pipeline you play in. And so, you know, we know, Tracy said something really interesting today, like agile is an old word, right? And it's really interesting because in a lot of environments, agile is almost still a new word because, you know, there's the way people adopt, right? But if you kind of look at agile software development as sort of the first system, and it's a very self-contained system, right? Mostly grew up out of Scrum, mostly people started doing sprints and people became like me, Scrum Masters and product owners. But it's got its own way of working, it's got its own vocabulary, it's got its own tools, right? It's a very, very self-contained system. And then whatever comes out of the teams goes downstream hopefully now into more of a CI/CD pipeline. But in the past, it would have gone down into QA and security, and maybe you're still living some of that life. But it leaves, the code leaves, and it goes into a whole new system. And the system has its own vocabulary, has its own tools, it has its own ways of working, it has its own humans, right? And then the button is pressed, or the button presses itself, and it's deployed into production, and we enter into system number 3. And as you can guess, new vocabulary, new tools, new ways of working. And the problem with IT is we grew up kind of like a tree, right? Where we share the same trunk, but the branches don't know each other, right? They're so far apart that it became very, very difficult for those to intertwine. And so we are a system of systems. And one of the reasons we're where we are today is because those systems didn't grow up together, right? We didn't grow up. You know, they say that you should be in parallel lanes. No, you should be in the same lane, right? You should be in the same car. So we didn't really do this together. Agile software development grew up separately. Even CI/CD is growing up a little bit separately. And now we have in the operations space a SRE or something similar to that. So we have to start thinking as systems thinkers in order to be the future generations of the humans of IT. So have you heard this term T-shaped? Anybody hear this term? You should be a T-shaped professional. Some of you have heard about it, right? I'm going to tell you what it means. It's really nothing magical. I just asked you how you identify yourself, right? Whether you're a developer, operations, security, maybe another role, right? That's the stem of your T, right? That's your deep competency, whatever that deep competency is. And chances are pretty good you've been growing that competency over many years. Some less, some more, right? But you've been really grooming that skill. It's probably how you identify on your resume. It's how you identify on LinkedIn or on your business card, right? It is the skill. So if you're a software engineer, your deep competency, right? The challenge is in today's environment, it's not enough, right? We grew up IT, and I said I've been in IT a long time. We grew up IT as an organization of eyes. And I'm not talking about eyes in an egotistical sense. I'm talking about eyes in the form of a shape, right? Where we had a lot of specialists, but the cross-pollination of knowledge across those domains really wasn't as prevalent as it should be. So today we ask you to become T-shaped, right? To look at the top of your T and figure out what skills you should add to that top. Now, you don't have to have multiple stems. Overachievers in the room, please let's not talk about being pie-shaped, comb-shaped, or anything else. Let's start with T's, right? So you want to have your deep competency, but you also want to think about what skills do you need to add to the top of your T that will make you a better systems thinker, make you more multidimensional, and also be able to make the pipeline go a lot faster with a lot more skills. Test-driven development, right? TDD, anybody hearing about TDD, right? All right, that's a T-shaped skill, right? I'm still a developer, but I need to know just enough testing, right? And I'll give you the final analogy, and we're gonna look at some data about really deep skills, which skills have emerged. So my daughter's an artist, she's a painter, right? But she needs to know just enough about other mediums like clay or metal or fabric to make her painting come alive, right? She doesn't need to be, put on the welding thing and become a sculptor, right? A welder in metal. She doesn't need to become a sculptor, but she needs to know just enough about a lot of different mediums. Well, you're artisans, and so you need to know just enough about a bunch of other topics, other domains, in order to not only cross-pollinate vocabulary, that's great, not only just to understand their tools, that's great. It makes you a more desirable talent. It also helps you contribute more to your environment because the more you know, the more the interoperability between humans actually occurs. Make sense? So in 2018, the DevOps Institute fielded an annual, what is now an annual project, the survey's open again. We asked the question of the community, which skills do you consider to be must-have, nice-to-have, and not important across several different categories. We had about 1,600 people across the world complete. It's a very deep survey. By the way, it's open today, so my call to action for you at the end of today is please go fill out the survey so that we can look at year over year. But we had about 1,600 people across the world fill out this survey, and the results, some of which were expected and some of which really weren't. If you look at kind of the spread of the respondents, as you can imagine, Europe and the US, India, came in very strongly, but we had respondents from, countries that, Slovakia, we had a pretty healthy, anybody from Slovakia? A pretty healthy presence from Slovakia. We had presence throughout Asia, Australia, not as much through China. I think there were probably some more firewall issues above everything else. But the data was actually really interesting. And I think what was really fascinating, of the 1,600 people, about 61% of those were in some type of a role that could hire. So from a junior manager all the way up to the C-suite, and we'll take a little bit of a look at some of that data as well. And about, I forgot what the exact number is, like 54% came from companies over 20,000 people. So we felt like we got a pretty good enterprise representation of this data. Whoops, let's go back. So key takeaways. First of all, regardless of what company you work for, almost every respondent said their preference would be to hire from within. So your organizations actually do want to help you upskill. All right, and investments are being made. I mean, anybody work for Amazon? Amazon just made an announcement, $700 million to be invested in upskilling by 2025. All right, so organizations, particularly the large, complex enterprises, are starting to make investments. 3 types of skills, 3 categories of skills came out almost statistically equal in importance. Automation, not a huge surprise. Process, not as much of a surprise. Soft skills. All right. Now, I don't like the term soft skills because soft skills are hard, right? But your human skills came out statistically equal to your technical skills, right? I want to say that one more time. Your soft skills, your human skills, statistically equal to your technical skills, right? And it isn't just the soft, mushy stuff. I'll show you some of the data, right? But it is important if you're moving into more of a T-shaped role to really think about your communication skills, your conflict management skills, your empathy skills. Again, we'll look at that. Automation obviously makes DevOps a big success, but process is important for intelligent automation, right? Because the automation will only replicate the process that you have in place. So you need to be comfortable with process. IT operations and security came out as very, very important in the data. And the other interesting thing about the respondents is literally 27% identified as developers, 27% self-identified as some type of operation. So again, when we look at which way did it skew, it actually came out fairly equal. Business skills were really only important to leaders, and vertical market skills were only important in certain industries. So if you were going into healthcare, it wasn't necessarily important that you had a background in healthcare. It certainly helped. 37% of the respondents are hiring. All right. So that means when we look at the talent market that there is a huge gap in the talent market right now, right? Everybody's talking about this mythical full stack engineer, right? More and more are looking at full stack teams, but 37% of the respondents, remember I said a good majority of them are in hiring positions, said they were hiring, right? And the skills that they're looking for are not necessarily just your technical skills. Again, don't misunderstand, your technical skills are very important, but not just your technical skills. So I think, and again, the full report is up on our website. You're welcome to download it. It's free. It's 48 pages. I mean, there's a lot of data in there. I'm going to just give you a little synopsis today. So having kind of set the stage for recognizing that your skill or your skills journey, is not stopped, but the direction fill the top of your T with. Really, and that's what we're going to focus on, right? Again, whatever your deep competency is, that's an area that you've chosen or it's chosen you. But let's talk more about the top of your T and what kind of skills you could be adding to that. So again, fascinating when we looked at the 3 different layers of respondents, the C-suite, the management layer. By the way, the management layer is the hiring layer, right? And then the individual practitioner. There was some agreement in certain areas, right? There was definitely an agreement on process skills. There was sort of an agreement on automation skills. The C-suite bumped it up a little bit, but practitioners and management layer felt it was pretty close. Functional, again, even though it wasn't high, statistically pretty close in terms of their perception about that. Specific automation tools came out pretty low. Right, you're going to see that with process too. Specific process skills, ITIL, Agile, project management, pick any of the above, didn't necessarily come out high on the list. Important, but not at the top of the list. Same thing with specific tools. Right, they'd rather know that you could do systems analysis or that you understand flow as much as understanding individual automation. And then business skills, again, depending on which perspective, but look at soft skills. Right? Soft skills really kind of, the big aha that came out of this data was how important, the kind of emphasis that was placed on that. And remember, that's the cultural element, right? That's going to be the cultural difference that your organization is going to look for in order to be able to make this transformation. So I'm going to just spend a couple of minutes just kind of drilling down into the different categories. Again, I know it's a little bit of an eye chart, and I invite you to download the whole report. But we're going to look at functional skills, automation skills, soft skills, process skills, just to figure out what is the data really telling us. Now, I've given this presentation more than once, so I can tell you what I think the data is telling us. But again, I want you to really kind of process from a personal perspective, what is the data telling you? Right? Because again, if we're going to be successful at continuous delivery, we're going to really move forward faster. You know, as Tracy said this morning, moving from monolithic to microservices, there is a strong cultural element to that. And you also have to understand culture is not surgical. I can't go into your organization and surgically remove your old culture. Some wish we could, right? Particularly some at senior management wish we could just go in and like do a little surgery, take out the old culture, attach a new one, and there we are. But it doesn't work that way. So let's start with functional skills. This was really fascinating to me because I told you half the respondents self-identified as developers and half identified as operations folks. IT operations and infrastructure, regardless of the role you were in, came in number 1 and number 2 because developers are getting a lot more involved in infrastructure, right, and in operations. So the line is no longer really a clear line. Right? And then you start to even drill down further. Security, DevSecOps, right? Security is everybody's responsibility, came in number 3 in the functional skill. So if you don't have some core security skills, you now need to know, if you're a developer, how to write it, how to build it, how to test it, how to secure it, how to deploy it. And that all becomes a big part of this, right? And then we start to move into SDLC and QA. Take a look at testing. Testing really showed, how many of you know how to test? How many of you, anybody testers by trade? Okay, so how many of you feel that you have pretty solid testing skills? Now what does that mean? You can write a test case, right? So some of you, not many of you, right? Testing is, I would tell you, one of the few skills that everybody has to add to the top of the T, right? Test-driven development is not an anomaly, right? DevSecOps has a very strong testing element to it, right? CI/CD, very strong testing element to it. And even though we're going to automate testing, humans have to understand, right, the practices, the principles of testing. So I would tell you, if you're going to start to add something to your top of your T, testing definitely rises there. And then you work your way forward and forward. And again, if you start to look kind of how this climbs down the mountain, you can see that at the top, we're looking at a very, very broad base, operations and infrastructure and security, and then it kind of works its way down. Just because a skill isn't showing up as a must-have, it may be showing as a strong nice-to-have. And you have to, again, within your organization and within your own personal goals, decide whether that's important for your role or not, right? The not important, I think, is more telling. When we start to look at, you know, I thought it was really fascinating that GRC made a very strong not as important. Maybe because we have internal auditors, right? Maybe that some of the respondents, that's not their, you know, area of expertise, or that the auditors have backed off a little bit. Maybe the tools are giving us better compliance. I'm not 100% sure on where that's coming from. You'll see it in a couple of other ways too. Technical skills, no great surprise, right? Cloud, 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 right? And of course now it's cloud, cloud, hybrid, cloud, 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 hybrid, right? So, it's not entirely cloud. But you can see on the must-have side, there's no doubt about the fact that, that cloud is really important. But look at analytical knowledge coming in number 2, right? Your ability to work with analytics on a technical side. Remember, these are technical skills. So the ability for you to be able to optimize analytics and have the skill behind some of the tools that are performing that. Again, I could name a bunch of names. I'm trying to be a little vendor agnostic here, but you know who I'm talking about, right? So understanding analytics regardless of tools, it's not just one provider, by the way. Understanding the practices and principles, I think, of analytics is really important. And then we start to really go from in the 50s all the way down to the 20s, the user interfaces, specific frameworks, working knowledge, and mobility. See, a few years ago, that would have been much, much higher. Look where AI is, right? AI is not at the top because it's new, right? It can't be a must-have skill, but it really had a very, very healthy showing in the nice-to-have, right? We're doing the survey now. I'm really interested, the report publishes in February, whether we're going to see a growth in AI, because I would not be surprised if we not. And mainframe, even though mainframe showed really small anybody working on the mainframes? Mainframe ops, we were just at DevOps Enterprise Summit, right? The Z lives. Really, there's not enough mainframe developers right now, and so talk to a bunch of people at DevOps Enterprise Summit about that, and I will tell you, mainframe's not dead yet. But again, it's showing as a small must-have. On the process side, I thought this was really interesting because, IT, we love our frameworks, right? So we have ITIL and Agile and Scrum and, I don't know, give me a bunch of them. IT for IT, Lean, I don't know. We've got more frameworks than any other business units. What's fascinating about the results here is that the upper half really had nothing to do with an individual framework, right? It was critical thinking process skills that showed up at the top as must-have, supported on the bottom side by ITIL and Agile and project management and program management and product management and all of that sits below it. So the message here was, from your perspective as a human, is that you really need to focus on building your understanding of SDLC, regardless of your role, right? You need to understand SDLC. You need to understand flow. You need to be able to analyze flow, right, from a process perspective, regardless of which way that it goes. Source control modules, Agile in whatever flavor you like, right? So just agility served as very important. There's testing again, right? Testing makes a really strong showing here, right? Understanding test-driven development, test-driven deployment, systems thinking, right? None of these are aligned with a specific framework, but you need to be able to see the system end to end instead of just your piece of it. And then as we start to go to the bottom, you could see Scrum, you could see ITIL, you could see program, you could see project, right? Again, little by little by little, because another framework could emerge tomorrow. So again, if you're looking at growing your own personal process skills, think above, right? Think about flow, think about SDLC, think about systems thinking. Those are the kinds of skills that you really want to groom. And then from a soft skill perspective, as I said before, soft skills not so soft. They're hard, right? Human to human interaction is not easy because this human and me, we're different, right? We have different opinions, we have different experiences, we have different ways we process. And so understanding, we use the term communication collaboration fairly frequently. Anybody know the difference? What's the difference between communication and collaboration? Communication is one way, absolutely right. It's passive. I tell you, and then you tell me. And that's important, right? We need to communicate with each other, right? There's a difference in collaboration, though. It's really a difference in collaboration. Sorry, somebody said? I need your help. Even take it a step further, I'm going to ask your opinion. What do you think, right? So it isn't just I'm communicating to you, and you're communicating back to me, right? And that could be almost instantaneous. So, it's not necessarily there's no lag, right? But there's a really big difference in collaboration, right? When we collaborate, we respect each other's differences, we respect each other's experience. I ask you, what do you think? Right? I ask for your opinion. Sometimes you think that's a given. It's not as easy as you think, right? And then we go back down into interpersonal skills, the comfort with sharing knowledge, right? Being able to transfer knowledge. We all want to do that, right? It's not easy, all right? It's not easy, right? I tell you what you know, but I may not tell you what I know. And so really comfortably sharing knowledge and having that respect, I think, is important. And you work your way down. There's a couple that kind of jump out here that I just want to emphasize. Empathy, right? Empathy, if you go online, empathy really has kind of taken on, I think, a new spirit, particularly in the tech space, because empathy means I'm going to walk in your shoes, right? I'm going to put myself in your place. I'm going to try to understand this from your perspective, right? So empathy is a skill that we have to practice, because right now I can only tell you from my perspective. So it is a skill we definitely need to practice. And then the other one that's emerging very quickly is customer experience, right? Being able to not only empathize with your colleagues, but really understanding what your customers experience. And there's a lot of interesting work that's being done in that area right now in terms of customer experience. But I'm not telling you this just like for some fun knowledge, right? These are the kinds of skills that don't happen overnight, right? You don't sit in a class and you suddenly become a great empathizer, right? There's skills that have to be practiced, and they have to be practiced with other people, right? And I think that's important as well. And I said, if you work your kind of way down, leadership, diplomacy, all of these really made a healthy presence in terms of where you need to kind of do a little bit of a self-assessment. There's lots of tools out there that you can do to help you understand yourself and help you understand others. So I hope I've given you just a little bit of a taste of the kinds of things that you, on an individual basis, because remember, humans are individuals, right? We're all human. Regardless of anything else, we're all human. But your journey and my journey are going to be different, and your journey and the journey of the person sitting next to you are going to be different, right? And this, by the way, is the hard part of CICD, because you have to kind of look at your own, and we're looking at some skills assessments and some other things that you can be able to do. But you have to understand that unless you put all of these pieces together, right? Becoming a T-shaped person is not just a flavor of the year. Becoming a T-shaped person means you really start to add to your portfolio. You become a better artist. And don't kid yourself that technology is not an art. It is very much an art. So polish your soft skills every day. Build your automation skills. Continue to build your automation skills. But don't do that in favor of looking at other skills as well. You have to learn to be expandable. Okay, so again, as I said, you can download a full copy of the report. It's very, very deep. There's a lot of data. There's some interviews with hiring managers and all of that. So again, welcome to go up to our site, download the whole report for free. And I do want to invite you to two things. First of all, the report survey is open again. So if you've got a few minutes to spare, you can look on social, you go up on our website. Please fill out the survey. The more data we get, the more we can present things like this to you. And on December 10th, we're hosting Global Skill Up Day, a virtual summit. We've got 18 hours of little bite-sized pieces of knowledge for you to be able to take some of the skills I just mentioned to you. You'll know, if you go up to the website, you'll know most of the names of the people that are taking time to be able to teach it. Anyhow, with that, thank you very much. Do we have time for any questions, or what was that? 1 or 2 minutes. Do we have any questions? Yes, sir. So it's a very interesting analogy that it looks like a backlog. And I've not heard that before, but you're not wrong about that, right? It really does look like a backlog, a prioritized backlog in terms of, like, should I do skill 1, skill 2, skill 3, skill 4. The difference here is that you already have a lot of this experience. And so I think a lot of it's a personal assessment. I said we're looking at some skills assessment tools to help you along that way, but you need to be able to use this as more of a roadmap than a backlog. Meaning, do I feel I have a healthy understanding of SDLC? If I do, great, right? That's something that's in my toolkit, right? If I feel that when I work with colleagues, I'm really struggling because we're just not understanding each other, maybe that's something that you need to make a personal commitment, or, gee, I really want to learn Spinnaker, right? So we're never going to call out specific tools, right? There are graduations of different types of tool categories. But so more than a backlog, think of it as a little bit of a personal assessment, because you may not need the top 3, either because you have them or because that's not a high priority in your job. So you can look at it. But it was a very interesting perspective to kind of see it that way. Did anyone else see that as like kind of a personal skills backlog? Fascinating. I love that. Any other questions? I'll be around, so if you do have personal questions, happy to answer them. I said I'll be around for the entire conference, and thank you for the opportunity to talk to some humans.